Hi there, and welcome to Returnology, where we talk about retail, supply chain, commerce, and everyone's favorite topic, returns. For our show, we bring in leading experts from retailers, brands, and third party logistics providers to dig into the hottest topics, trends, challenges, so that you know what your shoppers are expecting and you can deliver on those expectations without crushing your bottom line. Essentially, we provide you the cheat sheet to help you ace returns. So I'm your host, Natalie Walkley, and I'm joined here today with Amena Ali, CEO of Optoro and Forbes 50 over 50 winner. Amena, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me. And who doesn't want a cheat sheet to ace the exam? I mean, I'm trusting that's like okay to do. I'll run that by my GC, but thank you. That sounds awesome. And I love the idea of returnology, of the study of all things return, so that you can go conquer the beast that is return. So thank you so much for having me.
So, Amena, before we dig in and talk about the returns dilemma, tell me a little bit about yourself and Optoro.
Pleasure to do so. So I've been at Optoro for about a year and a half now and loving every minute of it. We are a returns management system provider, an RMS provider, much like you would think of a WMS, a TMS, an OMS. And we take a systematic view, a whole life cycle view to returns to understand all the way from soup to nuts, from initiation through transport to receiving and disposition. What are the costs and revenues associated with returns? So I am delighted to be here with you to talk about everything returns today.
I love that. And we are delighted to have you. And as you know, I'm thrilled to be a part of this conversation because I've spent the latter half of my career in supply chain and tech, and from working at a global 3PL here in the country music capital of the states, Nashville, Tennessee, and then spending several years in the order management space as well, at leading vendors in that space. So I'm thrilled to just geek out with you today a little bit about supply chain and tech and the challenges that retailers are seeing and how they can solve them. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So Amina, obviously you and I spend a large part of our day talking returns. And in fact, Optoro as a company has spent over 15 years solely focused on returns and helping solve this problem. So when we say the returns dilemma, walk me through what actually is the returns dilemma?
Yeah. So dilemma suggests you've got two choices that are polar opposites and fighting each other. So think about this. The cost of returns is sky high. We estimate for $100 item, it's close to 30% of the cost of return. So you say, wow, that is pricey to send that stuff back through the supply chain, the reverse supply chain. Tell you what, just make everything final sale, no returns allowed. Or charge people a cost for the restocking fee, the transportation, everything involved. The problem with that is more than 2/3 of shoppers, I've seen some studies that say that north of 80% of shoppers will take a look at the returns policy before they decide to shop with a retailer. So if you're really draconian and you say returns are not allowed or I'm going to charge everybody, it's a bad thing. And if you have a come one, come all, free for all, that can crush your margins. So what do you do? So that's one way it's a dilemma. The other little situation is that quite often the people who return the most also shop the most. So if you're looking at it from a CLTV lens, a how do I drive my revenue lens, it's not as simple as all returns are good or all returns are bad. It's a dilemma. What do you do?
Yeah, exactly. I think my husband would say I probably fall in that frequent shopper and category. But it's almost like a scale, and if you tip it one direction too much or you focus on one side too much, it causes problems elsewhere, right? And it's also a dilemma because retailers are thinking about almost all the retailers I've interviewed in my career. They're all thinking about how do we delight our customers, and yet they have to focus on profitability, and that's where returns can be such an interesting crux of the conversation because 83% of retailers strongly agree that returns are a concern for profitability. And that's from our friends at McKinsey. So you can almost take this dilemma, like how you said, like these competing ideas, and say, okay, well, if I don't invest in something to help me solve returns, whether it's technology or whatnot, then I've got all these repercussions and these pains that come as a part of it that impact that customer experience. So it's interesting because it's not quite as binary as I think people think that it is.
For sure.
So when we think about returns, and some of what you're saying here too, Amina, is that it really becomes too costly of a problem not to solve, right? But it's a hard problem to solve. In fact, our friends at Gartner found that 97% of retailers don't have an executive owner assigned to returns. 97, that's almost 100% of retailers. And yet, our studies show that in the last 3 to 5 years, returns are jumping to a top 5 priority to solve, probably driven by that profitability equation. So, oftentimes, this becomes kind of that nagging thought for retailers, right? We're having a great year, sales are going great, but I've got this nagging problem in the background. And you could almost call it, like we like to refer on the marketing team, the Roman Empire of retail. Are you a TikToker, Amina?
I've heard of the Roman Empire, yes, and in that vein particularly.
So have you ever asked Gus about the Roman Empire?
Yeah, I don't know if my husband spends how often a day is it? Is it every day or every hour?
So if you're not familiar with the Roman Empire and you're listening today, so there was this trend that went viral on TikTok probably a couple months ago where people would ask their spouse or partner or husband how many times they thought about the Roman Empire in a week. Just for giggles, I did it with my husband, and he said at least twice a week, which was shocking. And when I asked him why, I said, "Well, what do you think about?" He said, "Well,
Yeah,
the aqueducts were just amazing."
the aqueducts.
The aqueducts. So there you have it. That was my husband's thing. But as we think about this, Amina, and kind of the Roman Empire of retail, how do
Yeah.
you see that connecting with returns?
Well, in my life, in that scenario, I'm thinking about the Roman Empire every minute of the day because I'm thinking about returns. But I think the reason it's equivalent to the Roman Empire is because it's like you said, it's this nagging thing that it's hard to do right. There's no one size fits all solution. I think you have to get into personalization. You have to use analytics. You have to look at it systematically to figure out how you address it. I was talking to someone the other day, and we were reflecting on the fact that quite often you walk into a warehouse, and that dark pile over there, the forgotten corner of the warehouse, is where returns go to die. The problem is that stuff can really add up, and you have inventory, locked up in there. You have working capital locked up in there. One
Right.
person's return is somebody else's product you're looking for. So you have to shine the light on it, and figure out what you can do to manage it systematically, because otherwise it's just going to be this thing that just annoys you that you don't know how to fix.
Yeah, I love that you just mentioned the warehouse because Zebra Technologies did a study late last year or mid last year that found that almost half of warehouse operators cited returns as their top operational challenge in a warehouse. Their
Yeah,
top challenge.
I got to tell you, I was at a customer warehouse just a couple weeks ago, and here were people on the receiving line, and they had all manner of stuff coming back. This is a mixed assortment retailer. And I'm like, I don't know if I could do that job where you are receiving all manner of goods coming there without the help of some software and automation to guide you to decide, is it new? Is it not new? How do you decide what gets exceptions processing, in
Yeah.
terms of, is it the right item? It is really complicated, and often, right, it's your best people you have to put on that job, because you know without the help of software automation, you're relying on tribal knowledge, you're relying on experience, and frankly that doesn't scale. Like, what the heck do you do during peak? You have to hire up. How are you going to train all these people? So it is really a complicated thing to get done correctly without the assistance of some sort of tool, automation, some way to manage that process.
Yeah, it puts a lot of pressure on the operators themselves. And then not to mention it usually takes 2 to 3 times the labor to
Yep.
process returns. So it's your best people, presumably your most expensive people,
Yeah.
and you need more of them, right? So let's unpack that a little bit as we talk about cost and returns, because you'll hear all the time, returns are costly or they're so expensive.
Yeah.
Break that down for us. Why are returns so expensive?
Yeah, I think you have to think about all the various components of cost. So let's just talk about time. Time and touches as two things that are the underlying causes of why costs are the way they are for return. So the aspect of time. I've got some product that's coming back. I've got a peak season where if that product is new, I need to turn that back around as soon as possible, get it listed back on the website so that somebody else can order it so that I don't have to mark that down. Because if I miss that window, because let's say I have a huge backlog of returns, I'm going to need to mark that down substantially. That whole aspect of the markdown and the efficiency, basically, what's your velocity at which you can efficiently process and optimize the returns, that drives close to half the cost of returns. That's the actual markdown. The next biggest piece is transportation, and that then goes to touches, right? You have to
Mhm.
get it back from the shopper, figure out, are they mailing it back? Are they dropping it off? What's involved in doing so? Am I taking it back to another location? I then got to do sortation. I got to do processing. I have to do dispositioning. All of those things, all of those aspects of transportation and processing is the second biggest piece. And then you've got things, pardon me, related to customer calls. Where is my refund, right? So, what's your refund policy? Is it refund at warehouse receipt? Is it refund at processing? Is it refund at drop off? Is it refund at initiation? Like you've got customers waiting for refund, and you do not want irate customer calls because that not only leads to, your call center costs, but then to CSAT. So add all these pieces up between the time at which it gets back to stock, your processing efficiency. I mean, here's a tangible metric. What's your receiving units per hour? And I would venture to say that if you have a, a kind of homemade solution or not a purpose built solution, you're not going to have a very efficient process for all the reasons we talked about, because you've got a variety of items coming in and you're having these poor operators stand there and figure out what's new and not new. And then what do you do with all the stuff that doesn't go back to stock, right? Your recovery is a huge piece of it. So it's all these pieces that come into the picture.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we talked a little bit about this earlier, but all of these factors to just kind of snowball and create that rolling impact of the effect of returns. And then if you think about, the cost of a bad experience, if you will, the opportunity cost, right? So I'm a shopper, I have a returns experience with you, and it's a negative experience. I'm not likely to come back and shop with your brand. So now you've lost that lifetime value of that particular shopper. Curious, because one of the fun things about being in supply chain and retail is that all of us are also consumers and shoppers. So Amina, what's your latest returns experience? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I have two stories to share, but let me just add to what you just said. Not only are you not liable to come back and shop, but as we know from a um, customer survey standpoint, shopper survey standpoint, chances are it's the extremes who will comment, who will take the time to go on someone's website. So it's going to be the people who are really delighted and the people who are really upset. Because if you're really unhappy, you're going to go vent. And then when you do that, the next person who comes to shop and they look at how many stars are they? What's the feedback? And have you seen the AI summaries? Right? So nowadays, when you go to these sites, you don't even need to, oh, who are the 5 stars? Who are the 1 star? I can look at a consolidated summary. And I've looked at those summaries myself as a shopper to say people are unhappy with, and then that will tell you whether or not you shop. So you're actually going to dissuade the next shopper if you have a bad experience. Okay, so two stories to share. So I think I was on, I don't know, I was traveling, I was on holiday something. I bought a pair of pants that I loved. And I thought, oh, this is great. In hindsight, I should have bought another pair of pants. I love these, they're so versatile. And I thought, let me go order And I tried to really match the same SKU, the same everything, because of course there's so many varieties that kind of sound the same. I matched it one for one. I ordered another color, and sure enough, the fabric was completely different.
Mm.
Same manufacturer, same general time frame. It didn't fit the same. It didn't feel the same. I was really disappointed. And I may have even ordered like 2 pairs because I'm like, I need to stock up because when I love a product, I want it handy.
Right.
So then I decided, well, maybe they change. And like I'm in the business, I'm like, well, maybe they changed the factory in which it's made. The fabric's different. Something happened with their supply chain. I'm going to go to the store and I'm determined to find that product. And I was completely committed to this product. I would have given it like 1,000 stars. I go to the store. I can't find, so I try on other pants. I'm like, yep, they changed factories, the textile supplier, something happened, and I had to return the ones that I ordered online. And mind you, I am like, this is a brick and mortar retailer and an online. So I took the time to go. This was like
Yep.
my big thing. I was going to get it. I could not find the pants. And then I had to stand in line to return it. And then I had to stand in line, return it. And I just walked away thinking they could have had like 3 products that they sold if this had happened. And instead, I had this huge disappointing experience and I did not get the product that I want. So I am still pining for that pair of pants. If you see it somewhere, you'll need to let me know. I'll have to tell you. The other example, which I thought, my God, there has to be a better way. So I recently ordered different categories, solar lights for my garden. Pretty easy to put together. I put them out, and of course, you have to wait till it's dark to see, does it work? Does it light up as expected? And, it's like a dozen products in what I ordered. And I'm like, oh, one of them is missing. And I thought it was missing because, of course, I didn't sit there counting, is it 12? But I figured it's correct. I'm assembling them, putting it out. Turns out it's the product was defective. It was there.
Mm.
So like the reason code I put in was up, you only sent me 11. I ordered 12 and I'm happy with the rest of them. But sure enough, I had to dig them all out, disassemble them, try to clean them up. And of course, you can never package it back exactly the way it came. I'm not a forward fulfillment person. I can't get it back. So like I'm like shoving it in the box. And it was a real shame that I had to return all 12 just because one didn't work.
Yeah. It's just, it screams inefficiency and, and cost, right? And loss ultimately.
Yeah.
Ugh. Well, it's interesting when we talk returns in commerce, or even when I tell people, oh, return software. I think people have something very specific in their mind based on their experience with return software. So to kind of set the stage for the next part of our conversation, when we talk about returns, there's really 3 touch points in the returns life cycle where software comes into play. The first one is that what you mentioned earlier, that initiation, usually via a portal on a retailer's website, somewhere where shoppers can go and say, hey, I want to return this item, and give the retailer or the brand a heads up that something is coming back. They want convenience. They want the ability to do it themselves.
And why? Like this fabric isn't what it used to be, or one of the products is defective, exactly, or something like that.
That's exactly right. The second touch point where software comes into play is really the return method. So whether that is you're taking it back into a store, like you mentioned, that you had in your experience, or you're dropping it off at a third-party store like a Staples. Maybe you're doing the doorstep pickup that, launched last year, or maybe you're doing a traditional mail back, but how is that retailer getting that item back into their hands? Mm-hmm. And then the third touch point of the returns life cycle where software comes into play is really that final step. And candidly, like one of the most overlooked steps where software really plays a role, but it's that receiving, that testing, that grading, and that dispositioning of that software. So I'm a warehouse operator, or I'm a store associate. I get the product. Is it the product that they say it is? And can I verify that? What's the condition of it? Is it available to sell or is it not? And then from there, how do I figure out what to do with that, right? Where to send it? And if I'm smart, thinking about where's the highest margin channel to then send that inventory to, right? a lot of retailers are getting returns and they're instantly marking it down 20, 30% and putting it on the floor or listing on their website. So, how is there a systematic way to start to say, okay, based on XYZ factors, this is the best place to send this, whether it's your own site or a re-commerce channel like, via Trove or Arrive or Recurate or something like that, or even like a donation site as well. But avoiding that like instant liquidation and instant markdown. So, Amina, when you're talking to retailers and 3PLs about returns, oftentimes they're thinking about one piece of that puzzle or one of those touch points. But tell us why it's so critical and why more and more retailers and 3PLs are thinking about the entire returns life cycle and trying to solve it holistically.
Yeah, so let's talk about receiving and dispositioning. I think there's like three parts to that equation. The first piece of it is the cost of receiving. What's the efficiency by which someone actually takes a look, an operator, and says, "Hey, based on the SOP, based on this product, this sweater, this is what qualifies for this brand, for this sweater, for this SKU, this is what qualifies as new." And you might have a different standard for another one. So maybe one manufacturer wants tags, original packaging, like literally it was not opened at all. Because mind you, this product is flowing back into inventory as new, and you don't want a customer getting it to say, well, this feels new and this feels kind of not new. So you've got that whole process of kind of what's the definition of new. And then
Mm-hmm.
and how do you efficiently make that determination? The second piece is in terms of test and grade, what is the cost of testing and grading? What is the cost of refurbishment? And is it worth doing so for that given product, given what recovery you can anticipate out of it? So you really need an algorithm to figure out, is it worth it or not? And that requires labor cost estimate, transportation cost estimate, and eventually recovery costs. So you need software to optimize that rules-based analysis of systematic dispositioning, because not only do you want to reduce costs, but you want to maximize recovery. The more upstream the product can go, the more likely it can go back into stock, and the more quickly it does so, the more valuable it is from a margin and revenue standpoint. And oh, by the way, from a CSAT standpoint, one of the things that we talk to our retailers a lot about is the idea of circularity, because you've got customers out there who are actually not looking for the brand new product, but they're looking for the previously loved product, if you will, the
Mm-hmm.
gently worn or pre-loved, in terms of re-commerce. And that is important from a circularity and environmental standpoint. And it's important for customers who want discounted goods. Like one of my favorite examples is we have a major national retailer, and they have all these baby goods. So think about strollers and playpens and I don't know, high chairs and car seats and all of the paraphernalia you need, when you're raising a child. Well, when you're done using it, can you send that back? Or if you get it and you don't want it, you don't like it. So that is the return or the pre-used. And how do you get that refurbished and back into circularity? So one of our partners, Rebel Store, for example, has a D2C offering. And by virtue of that, not only are they facilitating that circularity and the retailers getting the benefit, but guess what? All these parents are getting discounted baby good items, right? And they love the idea of that, and it's per the regulation. So like everybody wins. And so you need software to enable that kind of win-win-win scenario in which the shopper wins, the retailer wins, and the environment wins, because all that stuff was getting sent to landfill before. So I love that story because, it's good for everybody.
Yeah, I love that story as a parent that buys a lot of baby gear too.
True.
Well, something you said earlier, made me think because you were talking about the receiving and the dispositioning, and I think what many folks have historically thought about that is, why can't I just use my WMS? I already have that in the warehouse. So talk me through kind of that question or
Yeah.
that workaround? Like, can retailers use their WMS for returns, or 3PLs use it? And what's the downside or pros and cons of that?
Yeah, I would say a lot of people start that way because it's a natural question. I've got a WMS. Can I just use it? The point is it purpose built? And what's the cost and benefit of doing so? So, if I were that retailer, I would ask just the hard dollars and cents questions of, okay, how much labor is required to process return? Like really tangible number. How many people am I throwing at the problem right now? And is that sustainable for me in order to scale my business? Second question, how am I systematically doing the testing and grading, the returns reconciliation, the RTV or return to vendor, like all of these things that need to happen? What's involved in doing so? And I would dare say, and this is the business case and the analysis we do for every one of our 3PLs and our enterprise customers. Say, great, let's take a look at the receiving units per hour. Let's take a look at your recovery percentage. Let's take a look at how you're doing during peak times, right? Maybe this kind of system works at a low scale because there's not much action going on. What happens when volumes go up? And you will find that it's really not very economical or scalable. And that's when you really need a purpose-built tool, purpose-built software that can integrate into your OMS and your TMS and work alongside your WMS. Sometimes customers deploy us in a way that that's the case. Other times they chose, different approaches. But you really need to look at the dollars and cents to see, is that really going to work for you? And chances are it's not.
Yeah, it's it's interesting because a WMS is built for, usually pristine, like new products that are shipping to a known destination.
Yeah.
And returns are a little bit different because they're
Yeah.
coming back, they're onesie twosies, they're sometimes not a happy path, right? They require,
Yeah.
like, is this the right product and whatnot? And then they can go a variety of destinations depending on that testing and grading process, right? This particular conversation is really interesting to me, just coming from the order management space, because I kind of watched that market evolve over the last 5 to 10 years. And, 10 years ago, when retailers were thinking about order management, it was, oh, I'll use something in my ERP, or I'll use this workaround in my storefront. And it worked enough, I would say, like
Yeah.
temporarily, but as they started to really understand the complexity that came with that, then it was like, oh, well, if I have inventory across multiple nodes, and how do I route, and that need for a systematic approach kind of surfaced. That's when order management systems really took off. And I'm starting to see like a parallel with returns, because
Yeah.
they're so complex. And then you start to talk about omni-channel returns, and then you need an omni-channel system to start to look at the whole picture.
You know what it is? I think when the volume of returns wasn't what it is today, right? Thanks to the pandemic, thanks to online shopping, like the return rates, as we all know, for apparel and footwear bought online are close to 30%.
Yep.
Generically online, it's a little less than 20%. It's around 18% or so. And brick and mortar, it's roughly around 10%. So it's 3x higher to buy that. So like when you think about e-commerce and how e-commerce is here to stay, right? How many times have you gone into a store, you look at a product, you're like, okay, great, I can order this online. So e-commerce rates are going up. Online shopping continues to go up. So therefore returns are up 3.5 times, right? The NRF stats showed about $750 billion in returns last year.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, roughly 250 billion online, roughly 120 billion walked into stores. The volume is so huge that a kind of solution which is incidental, let's just say, WMSs, like you said, are designed for forward fulfillment. They're not really designed for the reverse logistics aspect of things. So that's when I think that you're like, well, it's like the tide has gone down, the iceberg is there, and you got to deal with it because the volume has really shown the spotlight on the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So this episode is titled "The Returns Dilemma." So how do we flip that script? I know Gartner does a ton of research on reverse logistics and returns, and they found that 68% of retailers are still considering returns a cost center.
Yeah.
So we also know that from our studies that savvy retailers are now like, hey, this is a priority. I got to solve it. So how do we do it? How do we flip the script and start to think about returns as something that can drive revenue and loyalty instead of just being a sunk cost center?
Yeah. So let's start with the shopper journey, the customer journey, right? So I'll go back to my own example of these solar lights I had ordered. There was nothing wrong with the product except one of them didn't work. I really wanted it, and I wanted it in time for a gathering I'm having. So what did I do? I initiated the return. Step one, make it easy to initiate. And step two, what I want to do, I just wanted to exchange it for a set that was there. I wasn't all about, oh, give me my refund. I'm going to go buy something else. I'm like, this product's pretty good. And by the way, I'd read a review that said when the lights didn't work, the company made it right. And that gave me the confidence to go shop with them. So I wanted to do an easy exchange. So I would say save the sale. And for loyal customers who actually want to buy the product, get the data for why are they returning it so that you can go back to the manufacturer and say, hey, you need to do a better job on the QC to make sure all 12 of those lights are working as promised, because otherwise I have to bear the cost of that return, right? Which is what happened. So make the exchange easy. And in this case, I love the product so much. I said, okay, I'm exchanging this and I want, come to think of it, I want another set of 12. I ended up buying actually 3 sets of 12 because I'm like, I want lights everywhere. This is great. So make it easy, but that's the happy path you want. And my only lament was that I couldn't just send back the one defective light and get that replacement. I had to deal with moving the whole set along. So make it easy to exchange, make it easy to drop off, get the benefit of consolidated transportation when you're getting the goods back from a third party drop off location. That will be the next step in the equation. And then finally, in terms of the, receiving and dispositioning, solve that so that systematically you are reducing the costs by ideally 50% and improving the recovery. Like, look at every single touch point and how you can address it.
I love that because at the end of the day, returns are just a part of the customer journey, and hopefully, like that example with the lights, it's a circular journey, right? And they're coming back and they want more, and they've had such a good experience, and they know you're going to make things right. I love that example. I have a similar returns experience where I ordered a bathroom vanity, and one of the sinks in the vanity came broken. Well, I wanted the vanity. I just wanted the sink not to be broken. So I requested a replacement sink, which they couldn't do. So the vanity sat on my front porch for 3 weeks.
Oh, that's a lovely sight. Just what you want.
I'm sure my neighbors love that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, as we wrap up here, I have one more question for you. And this is arguably the most important question I'm going to ask you today.
All right, I'm ready for you, Natalie.
Know me, this may not surprise you, but what is your favorite Taylor Swift song?
Oh, okay. So first editorial comment, her new album, I don't know what you think. It's a little flat in places. I'm going to suggest you focus on quality and not quantity. But speaking of quality, I would say, and maybe that's all part of this discussion, it's from the Reputation album, because of course returns are part of your reputation. I would say Ready for It, because I love that song. And it actually happens to go along with our discussion as well in terms of, are you ready for it, in terms of all the returns coming back.
I love it.
Dealing with your reputation. How about that?
There you go. I threw you a curveball there at the end. Awesome. Well, Amena, this was such a great conversation. Thank you for joining us. And there you have it, folks. The Returns Dilemma with Amena Ali, CEO of Optoro and Forbes 50 over 50 winner. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Natalie Walkley. We hope you'll join us next time at Returnology, where we provide you the cheat sheet to ace returns.
Thank you, Natalie. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I sure hope we shed some light on how you solve the dilemma or not get perplexed by the dilemmas. So, pleasure talking to you. Have a great day.
Sounds great. See you next time.
Okay, bye.